The morning after I buried my husband, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it until the man on the other end quietly said, "This is Daniel Whitmore, your husband's employer. I found something he left behind, but you must come alone. And whatever you do, don't tell your family." Before I could ask why, he added, "If certain people learn what your husband discovered, they'll do everything they can to get it first." 30 minutes later, I walked into his office and froze when I saw what was waiting on the conference table. My name is Emma Brooks, I'm 35 years old, and until 2 weeks ago, I believed there wasn't a single secret my husband could have kept from me. We had been married for 12 wonderful years, and while no marriage is perfect, ours was built on trust, laughter, and the quiet comfort of always knowing we were on the same team. My husband, Michael, worked as a senior executive assistant for Whitmore Global, one of the largest private investment companies in the country. His employer, billionaire entrepreneur Daniel Whitmore, often traveled around the world, and Michael spent years making impossible schedules somehow work. Whenever I asked about his job, he'd smile and say, "Work stays at work. Home is where I get to be just your husband." I never questioned it. 3 days earlier, I had stood beside his casket surrounded by white flowers, family, friends, and co-workers whose faces blurred together through my tears. They all described Michael the same way, dependable, honest, and the kind of person who quietly solved problems without asking for recognition. After the funeral, everyone gathered at my house. My older sister, Rachel, immediately started talking about practical matters, while my stepmother, Linda, kept asking whether Michael had left behind investments, company benefits, or important paperwork. She tried to sound concerned, but something about her questions made me uncomfortable. "I just don't want anything important getting overlooked," she kept saying. I nodded politely, too emotionally exhausted to think much about it. That evening, after everyone finally left, I sat alone in our quiet living room holding Michael's wedding ring in my hand. I told myself life would never feel normal again, but somehow I would learn to move forward, one day at a time. The next morning, at exactly 8:17 a.m., my phone rang. The caller ID displayed a name I had never expected to see: Daniel Whitmore. I stared at my phone for several seconds before answering. "Hello." A calm, professional voice replied, "Mrs. Brooks? This is Daniel Whitmore." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The Daniel Whitmore? Michael's employer? "I'm very sorry for your loss," he continued. "Michael was more than an employee. He was one of the finest people I've ever worked with." "Thank you," I whispered. "I know this request may sound unusual, but Michael left me very specific instructions. If anything ever happened to him, I was to contact you personally." My heart skipped. "What kind of instructions?" "I'd rather explain in person." I hesitated. "There are some things he entrusted to me that belong to you now." Before I could respond, his voice became more serious. "And Mrs. Brooks, until we've spoken, please don't discuss this with your family." I frowned. "My family? Why?" "I can't answer that over the phone." I simply promised Michael I would follow his wishes exactly. Everything about the conversation felt strange, yet nothing about Mr. Whitmore sounded dishonest. If anything, he sounded genuinely respectful. He gave me the address to Whitmore Global's headquarters downtown and asked if I could come that morning. An hour later, I stepped into the company's glass-covered lobby. A receptionist greeted me immediately. "Mrs. Brooks, Mr. Whitmore is expecting you." She escorted me to the top floor, where Daniel Whitmore stood waiting outside his office. Instead of offering a handshake, he quietly said, "Your husband spoke about you often." Then he opened the office door. On the conference table sat a large sealed envelope with my name written in Michael's handwriting. Beside it rested a small black security box. Daniel looked at both items before turning back to me. "I've protected these since the day Michael asked me to," he said softly. "Today, they're finally yours." My hands trembled as I picked up the envelope. The handwriting was unmistakable.
Emma.
Just seeing my name written by Michael made my eyes fill with tears. "I'll give you some privacy," Daniel said quietly before stepping out of the office. I carefully broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then life didn't give us as much time together as we hoped. Before anything else, I need you to know that loving you was the greatest privilege of my life. Everything I did was to make sure you'd always be safe, even if I couldn't be beside you." A tear rolled down my cheek. The letter continued. "There is one thing I never told you. I wanted to, but I promised I would keep it confidential until the right time." I looked toward the black security box. When Daniel returned, he unlocked it with a small silver key. Inside were neatly organized folders, several certificates, and a leather-bound notebook. Daniel sat across from me. "About 8 years ago," he began, "our company faced one of the most difficult financial challenges in its history. Very few people knew how serious it was." He smiled gently. "Your husband worked countless evenings helping our leadership organize critical records and coordinate solutions. He never asked for recognition, bonuses, or public praise. He simply believed it was the right thing to do." I stared at the documents in disbelief. Michael had never mentioned any of it. "He protected this company," Daniel continued, "and in many ways, he protected me too." Before I could gather my thoughts, my phone buzzed repeatedly across the table. Rachel, then Linda, then Rachel again. Finally, a text appeared. "Emma, did Michael leave you any important company documents? We need to know immediately." I looked up from my phone, my stomach tightening. "How would they even know about these documents?" I asked. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Only a handful of people knew Michael was safeguarding these files. Your husband was extremely careful. That's why those messages concern me." He slid another folder across the table. "Before you answer anyone, I want you to read everything." I nodded and opened the folder. Inside were company records, letters of appreciation, and signed documents showing Michael had been entrusted with overseeing a confidential project that protected employees during difficult financial periods. Every page reflected the same thing: integrity. Daniel folded his hands. "Michael earned everyone's trust because he never used confidential information for personal gain." My phone vibrated again. This time it was Linda. I answered. "Emma, where are you?" she asked quickly. "Out taking care of a few things. We heard you met with Michael's boss. If he gave you any papers, bring them home immediately. Family should look through everything together." Before I could respond, Rachel's voice came through the speaker. "She's right. You shouldn't make decisions alone." I glanced at Daniel. He simply shook his head once. "I appreciate your concern," I replied calmly, "but I need time to understand what Michael left before discussing it." Linda sounded disappointed. "We're only trying to help." "I know," I answered politely. "I'll call you when I'm ready." After ending the call, Daniel gave me an understanding smile. "Michael hoped you'd say exactly that." He reached into the security box one last time and removed a thin sealed folder. Across the front, in Michael's familiar handwriting, were words that sent a chill through me. "Open this only after you know who truly respects your choices, not just your possessions." I waited until I was alone before opening the final folder. Inside was another handwritten letter from Michael. "Emma, if you've reached this page, then you've already learned something important. Not everyone who asks questions is searching for the truth. Some people are only searching for what they think they can gain." I smiled sadly. That sounded exactly like him. The next pages explained everything. Years earlier, Daniel Whitmore had offered Michael a generous financial reward for helping protect the company during its most difficult period. Instead of spending it, Michael had quietly placed the money into carefully managed investments under a legal trust designed for my future. "I wanted you to have security," he wrote. "Not because I expected the worst, but because I always planned for your tomorrow, even while we were living our today." Tears blurred the words. There was nothing hidden from the law, nothing mysterious about the arrangement. Michael had simply wanted to ensure that no one could pressure me into making decisions before I understood what he had left behind. That evening, Rachel and Linda arrived at my house together. Linda forced a smile. "So, what exactly did his boss give you?" I invited them inside, but remained standing. "Michael left personal letters and legal documents for me." Rachel crossed her arms. "We're family. You should share everything." I took a slow breath. "I'll always appreciate your concern, but Michael trusted me to handle his final wishes. I'm going to honor that. Neither of them looked pleased. Linda sighed. We were only trying to help. I believe you, I replied gently. But some things are private. For the first time since Michael's funeral, I chose peace instead of guilt. And somehow, I knew he would have been proud. A week later, Daniel Whitmore invited me back to the company. This time, he wasn't waiting alone. Nearly every department manager and dozens of employees had gathered in the auditorium. Daniel stepped onto the stage. Today isn't about business, he began. Today is about honoring a man whose character shaped this company more than any quarterly report ever could. One by one, people stood to share stories about Michael. A receptionist remembered how he stayed late to help new employees feel welcome. A project manager recalled how Michael quietly solved impossible deadlines without ever seeking praise. Even senior executives admitted they trusted his judgment more than anyone else's. As I listened, I realized something beautiful. Michael's greatest success had never been the projects he completed or the confidential responsibilities he carried. It was the lives he touched through kindness, humility, and quiet integrity. Before the ceremony ended, Daniel handed me a small wooden box. Inside was Michael's favorite fountain pen and a framed certificate announcing a new employee scholarship established in his honor. At that moment, I understood. His greatest gift wasn't financial security. It was the legacy of a life that inspired others to become better people. 6 months later, life looked different. The grief hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defined every morning. I continued supporting the scholarship created in Michael's name, and each year I met young professionals whose dreams were made possible because one honest man chose to serve others with integrity. My relationship with Rachel slowly improved, while I kept healthy boundaries with those who hadn't respected Michael's final wishes. Looking back, I realized the greatest inheritance my husband left me wasn't money, documents, or investments. It was the truth about the man he had always been. A man whose quiet kindness outlived his years. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Remember, a person's greatest legacy isn't measured by what they leave behind, but by the lives they quietly change.